Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me one quick favor, see that little black subscribe button on the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Really does help this channel grow, my audience grow, and I appreciate it more than you know. Also, quick thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet $50 on any game. Get up to $1,111 in free bets courtesy of the Betfred Sportsbook. Thank you again. Now, here's the video that you came here for. I think we're going to hit a little bit of a quiet stretch here over the next couple weeks in the lead up to football season. SEC Media Days is done. So, like that big rush of content that we got from the football perspective is done. Now we go into practices, probably not a lot of media availabilities, probably a quiet couple weeks in football, and certainly a quiet couple weeks in basketball. Now, I know a lot of teams are going to do foreign tours and things of that nature, but portal recruiting is done. High school recruiting probably will not really pick back up until everybody gets back to campus and kids start taking official visits in the fall. With that said, when there is relevant news in college basketball and college basketball recruiting, we are going to hit on it on the Aaron Torres pod. And I do believe we got a piece of information today that was worth discussing. Today being Sunday, that was because on Sunday, one of the top high school players, in my opinion, in the class of 2024, Amon Noel, a 6-foot point guard from Pennsylvania, did in fact make his college decision. So one of the best point guards that is set to be a senior this coming season. Kid was down to 4 schools: Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia Tech, and the reigning national champion UConn. And drum roll, please. Amon Noel, 6-foot guard from Pennsylvania, chooses the University of Connecticut. So shout out those UConn Huskies. Second big-time commitment for UConn in the past couple days. More importantly, you look at the trajectory of this program. All kinds of sound effects today. They are on the way up. And I'm going to tell you this. I think UConn over the next 2, 3, 4 years really could go on quite a wild recruiting run. Now let's start by talking about the player. As I said, Amon Noel, he's actually only a 4-star guard. I don't get it. We're going to get into why in a minute, because to me, this guy is the complete package at the high school level. Now, listen, nothing's perfect. Nobody's a perfect prospect, and he is a little bit on the smaller side. 6-foot guard, but really does everything else at a very elite level, in my opinion. He's strong. He's powerful. He can get to the rim. He can finish at the rim. He's a pretty good 3-point shooter. He is a guy that gets others involved as well. Actually finished second in the EYBL this season in assists per game. So to me, he was one of the best guards all summer that I saw. And then on top of that, just look at who he had the option to play for. The defending national champions, UConn, Kentucky. Listen, you can criticize John Calipari for whatever. John Calipari doesn't recruit guys that he doesn't think can play in the NBA. Tennessee, they've put a ton of dudes in the league over the last couple of years. Georgia Tech, Damon Stoudemire. Remember, Damon Stoudemire is the Georgia Tech head coach. Played in the NBA, came from the NBA where he was a Boston Celtics assistant. Again, you think he's recruiting guys that he doesn't think can play at the ACC level and probably the NBA level? So to me, this kid is very undervalued. And I'll take it a step further. I think this very much falls in line with who Dan Hurley has been as a head coach. A guy that has been able to identify guys that far basically outpace their recruiting ranking. What do I mean by that? Well, this kid is ranked right now, as I record, the 36th ranked player in the 24/7 sports rankings. It's no knock on the guys who do this for a living. They're very good. They work very hard. But if there are 35 better players in this class, then the class of 2024 is a wildly underrated class. And everyone's saying that it is a class that doesn't have a ton of talent. If there are 35 better players than this guy, I want to see them. And he's a guy that I think as time goes on, you can mark it down right now, I think is only going to see his ranking continue to improve. By the way, as I said, that would fall in line with Dan Hurley, who, as I've said before on this show, I think he's starting to establish himself. But national championship coach, we get it. But beyond that, his eye for talent is through the roof astronomical. And we've seen over the last couple of years, a lot of guys outperform their recruiting ranking And oh, by the way, we see guys now when they're committing to UConn, they shoot up the rankings because the recruiting people are like, wait a second now. If Dan Hurley likes him, he must be pretty good. Let me give you an example. UConn, this coming year, Donovan Clingan, 7'2", 7'3" center. You know Donovan Clingan, who would have been a first-round pick if he had declared this year, who is projected as a top 10 pick in the 2024 draft. You understand Donovan Clingan wasn't even in the top 30 in the high school rankings for most of his high school years? Now, I get it. Played at the local school in Connecticut, Bristol Central. Shout out, I think it's the Rams. I want to say it's the Rams. Maybe that's Bristol Eastern. I can't remember. Bristol Central, great school, by the way. All sorts of talented players coming out of there through the years. But why I bring it up, he wasn't even a top 30 prospect for most of his high school career. Now he's going to be a top 10 pick. Certainly would have been a top 30 pick this year of the draft, and he wasn't even top 30 in his own class. Stephon Castle, UConn, guard, this class. He's going to be a freshman this coming year. When he committed, wasn't a top 30 prospect. By the end of the cycle, he was a top 10 prospect. Now many are saying that he, along with Donovan Clingan, will be a top 10 pick as well. Jordan Hawkins just went in the NBA draft lottery. You know, he was a fringe top 50 player in his class. Now, granted, I will say this, he was part of the COVID year, graduated in 2021, the summer before, nobody could see him in person. So I get that there were extenuating circumstances with him, but you go through Dan Hurley's track record. I am here to tell you, this dude sees stuff in guys that others don't. By the way, James Bouknight, who's in the NBA, was I think a top 40 to 50 player. Tyrese Martin, who was drafted in the second round in 2022, he wasn't ranked in the top 200 players in his class coming out of high school, was drafted by the Atlanta Hawks. Finally, let me say this about UConn. I think UConn, over the next couple of years, we could legitimately be looking at the next great recruiting power in college basketball. Now, a couple of things. I don't know if Dan Hurley, if he is going to just target the best players, because Dan Hurley is about development, relationships, bonding. He's certainly never going to hold a player back if they're ready to leave after a year or two. But I think he'd prefer to get guys in the program for 2-3 years, get his hands on them, get to know them, develop them, etc. But why I bring it up is because through the years, UConn actually has not been a historically dominant recruiting power. Jim Calhoun had some very high-profile guys, Rudy Gay, Charlie Villanueva, Andre Drummond. But for the most part, his best players were not can't-miss high school prospects, okay? Emeka Okafor. If I remember correctly, I think it was like Rice and Vandy. Like, Okafor was a great academic student. There weren't a lot of Big East schools that were after him. Kemba Walker, I can tell you for a fact, his second best offer at the time that he committed to UConn was Cincinnati. Shout out Mick Cronin, Big Mick energy, baby. But the bottom line is not everybody was after Kemba. Ray Allen, I know that, Kentucky was after him because there's a famous quote of him talking about Rick Pitino recruiting him. But he grew up in South Carolina. Most of the ACC, the North Carolinas, the Dukes were not after him. So UConn has never recruited at the highest level. But this is the reality for the Huskies right now. Off to a great start in 2024. Two really good players. This kid, Ahmad Noel, and then also a forward named Isaiah Abraham. 2023, remember a year ago, this past class, they had the number 3 ranked class in the country behind only Kentucky and Duke. Oh, by the way, what's going to be interesting is what happens going forward. They're in right now in 2024, 2025, and 2026 with a caliber of player, the likes of which UConn really has never recruited. Most notably, as I told you last week, Cooper Flagg, maybe the best player in high school basketball. He's from Maine. His mom played with Donovan Clingan's mom in college. UConn is recruiting this kid as hard as anybody. Now, everybody thinks he's going to Duke. UConn ain't backing down. And by the way, what does Duke have to offer that UConn doesn't at this point with John Shire as its head coach? I don't know. I'm just saying, whatever. Also worth noting, AJ DeBonsa, number 1 player in the class of 2026. Some believe he's the best player in high school basketball. Just finished his freshman year, about to be a sophomore. That's a kid that is from Boston. He's going to play his prep school ball out in California. But when the 2 best players arguably in high school basketball are from Maine and Boston, you think UConn's going to be in the mix. So you look at UConn, number 3 class last year, trending towards the top 3-4 class in 2024. 2025, the best player is a New England guy that UConn is very much after. 2026, UConn is after the top player as well. All worth noting. Could mean nothing, could mean whatever. But I'm here to tell you, UConn is rolling under Dan Hurley. UConn recruiting is rolling, and I don't think it is going to slow down anytime soon.